Picture this. You're in a crowded bar. Music is thumping, people are laughing, glasses clink, and somebody's telling a story they probably shouldn't be telling. And in the middle of it all, there's alcohol. Alcohol is one of the most consumed psychoactive drugs in the world. It's an unusual one, both an upper and a downer. It can energize or sedate, uplift or calm. And it might be the only drug that can kill you slowly or quickly. But it also brings us together, lowers our defenses, and reveals hidden truths.
Alcohol is probably most people's favorite drug.
It's been a part of humanity pretty much as long as we've been human.
There's a very literal sense in which intoxication led to civilization.
I'm Soni Kasem, and this is 1440 Explores. We're on a mission to uncover the essential knowledge that explains your world. We talk to the experts who know the subject best, and today we have two insightful guides to help us understand why humans drink. What happens in your body from the first sip of booze to the inevitable hangover the next day? Why did our ancestors start drinking thousands of years ago? And given everything we know about alcohol today, should we keep drinking? Stay with us.
Listen, learning has never been harder. The internet is overwhelmed with low-quality content, clickbait with little substance, AI-generated slop, and opinions masquerading as facts. Curious people like you are left sifting through noise instead of finding what matters. Enter 1440 Topics. We've curated the highest quality resources from across the internet. Think data visualizations, captivating videos, long-form journalism, and paired them with staff-written overviews to make every subject easy to understand and explore. Want to learn about venture capital or how new weight loss drugs work? Do you keep reading about CRISPR but are missing the best 101 on the breakthrough technology? Find all of this and so much more at join1440.com. 1440 Topics, separating what's worth your time from the rest of the internet.
All right, pretty soon, we'll trace alcohol's path from your lips through your body and break down exactly what's happening inside you, the good and the bad. But first, meet our guide, a man who is one of the world's top researchers on drugs and alcohol.
Hello, my name is David Nutt. I am a psychiatrist, a professor of psycho-pharmacology at Imperial College in London.
He's also the author of Drink, the new science of alcohol and your health. David has been studying drugs and its effects on the brain for more than 50 years. He spent 2 years at the National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C., and advised the UK government on drug policy. But then he got sacked in 2009 for publicly declaring that alcohol is more harmful to people in society than illegal drugs like LSD and ecstasy.
There was no relationship between the harms of drugs and whether they were regulated by law or not.
In fact, on a Friday night, as many as 70% of people in UK emergency rooms are drunk.
Beyond the health costs, there are policing costs, and they're very present because they occur at the time people are drinking. And then on top of all that, you've got the sum of lost opportunity costs from hangovers. In fact, hangovers cost more to the British economy than both the policing costs of drunkenness and the health harms of alcohol.
All of that, the ER visits, the police calls, the lost productivity, stems from one tiny molecule. So what is it about alcohol that keeps us coming back? Let's start with the basics and a few numbers to set the stage. Roughly a third of the world's adults drink alcohol. In the US and much of Western Europe, that number climbs to about 7 out of 10. So what is alcohol? At its core, alcohol is a simple molecule made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's produced when yeast breaks down sugar by fermentation, like in rotting fruit, leaving behind a liquid that can fuel engines or a night out. Alcohol affects many different neurotransmitters in our brain. If you're anxious, it calms you. If you're tired, it perks you up. If you're overstimulated, it slows you down. It's incredibly versatile, and that makes it appealing, though generally not at first.
What's perplexing about alcohol is the fact that when people start drinking, they usually don't like it. Alcohol itself is very bitter. If you put alcohol on the tongue of a dog, it'll wince and run away and not come back for more. And young people, when they're beginning to engage in drinking, find the same, which is why they often put alcohol into lemonade.
But eventually, our brains learn a powerful trick, linking the bitter smell and taste of booze with the warm buzz that follows. And that's how we acquire the taste for it.
Over time, eventually, that taste or smell begins to induce the pleasure that they later get when the alcohol gets to their brain.
So we know drinking can feel good. It can also wreak havoc on your body and health. So we asked David to take us on a journey from first sip to drunken stupor to the hangover the next morning.
So what happens when you're an old man like me who's acquired the ability to drink? Well, I'm just going to open a bottle of whiskey for you now, and I'm going to smell it. And the smell already induces in my brain memories of pleasant experiences with whiskey. I sip my whiskey and immediately I get a tingling sensation in my tongue and in the back of my throat. And that also tells my brain, this is the real thing. This isn't just a smell of whiskey, this is the taste of whiskey. And the alcohol in the whiskey is activating my taste receptors in my tongue and also activating some sensory receptors in my throat. And they together are going into the same part of the brain as where the smell went, and they're beginning to tickle up those parts of the brain which remember the pleasure of drinking. Then the alcohol molecules float down and roll down into my stomach, and then they get absorbed in my stomach and my duodenum.
That's the first part of your small intestine, where it then heads to your liver.
And then in the liver, some of them get broken down into a substance called acetaldehyde.
The acetaldehyde compound is also what causes us to turn red, to get flushed. It also happens to be a carcinogen.
But most of them get through there and get up into my brain. And alcohol gets in the brain very easily. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, the protective barrier of the brain, very, very quickly.
That's because it's such a small molecule. It takes just 5 or 10 minutes to start feeling a pleasant buzz.
And the first effect of alcohol is to enhance the neurotransmitter GABA, the calming transmitter in the brain.
GABA. That's gamma-aminobutyric acid, if you're curious. It's a key part of how we regulate our central nervous system.
And by enhancing GABA, we take away tension, we relax people, and we allow them, if they want to socialize, and most of humans do want to socialize more efficiently, it's easier to engage in eye contact, it's easier to laugh when the other person's laughing, etc.
It also gives us more confidence to actually talk to that attractive stranger at the bar. Though the science is mixed on whether it actually gives us beer goggles, the idea that other people seem more attractive after you've had a few drinks.
Then as I drink another drink, another 5-10 minutes later, the alcohol levels in the brain rise. And then they begin to release other neurotransmitters. They begin to turn on the dopamine system. And the dopamine system gets you high. It makes you louder, makes you more animated. It can make you irritable and aggressive. It can make you more lecherous.
One of the reasons some people binge alcohol, why they crave more, is because of dopamine. It feels so good. And there's another reason. A similar amount of alcohol also releases endorphins.
The so-called runner's high, well, they're also a large part of the drinker's high. Alcohol releases endorphins. Endorphins get you high. They're pleasure chemicals like dopamine, but it's a different kind of pleasure. It's a warmer, more intimate pleasure. But endorphins also, like dopamine, run the risk of producing some kind of dependence. And then if you carry on drinking, you begin to get into an area where there are serious issues in the brain, because when blood alcohol levels rise to about twice the drink driving limit, then you begin to block the glutamate system in the brain. The glutamate system is the on switch of the brain. It's the brain neurotransmitter which makes you do things. It's critical to everything. It's critical to all movement, to all perception, and to all memory.
So alcohol affects your brain in 3 big ways. First, it increases GABA, which slows down brain activity. That's why you start to feel relaxed, and why you might slur your words or lose coordination. Then it boosts dopamine, which makes you feel confident, talkative, maybe even invincible. But too much dopamine can make you mean and aggressive. And then finally, the booze blocks glutamate.
And if you block glutamate, you can't lay down new memories. And that's why people who drink excessively end up having amnesia. They call it blackouts.
Blocking the glutamate system is also responsible for another unpleasant part of drinking, the hangover the next day, where you feel tired, headachy, nauseated, and thirsty.
In hangover, you have too much glutamate. The brain is overactive, and that's why some people have fits during alcohol withdrawal. That's why you get what we call hangxiety.
You have to pee a lot because the hormone that controls urination, called vasopressin, is out of whack. So you pee out more water than you take in, causing dizziness and headaches. You're also hungover because you slept terribly. At first, your sleep is extra deep.
People often wet the bed because they're so deeply asleep that they don't wake up when they need to pee.
But then your sleep is disrupted. So overall, the quality of your sleep is bad as you enter hangover. So alcohol makes you feel looser, happier, and social. Or it can make you feel sadder, angrier, and sloppier. But it's also poison, and the health effects are numerous.
As well as being a very promiscuous pharmacological agent, alcohol is also a very promiscuous toxin. In fact, it's hard to find any organ in the body that alcohol doesn't damage.
It's probably the leading cause of high blood pressure in those without kidney disease.
It's associated with stomach ulcers because it's a toxin and it erodes the stomach lining. It's associated with both cirrhosis of the liver and liver cancer because it's a toxin, and the acetaldehyde in particular damages and inflames the liver. It's associated with brain damage, and that comes in part from the toxicity due to the hyperexcitation from the glutamate drive in the brain, which is compensatory to the intoxication with alcohol. And it also comes from brain damage from being drunk and falling over and being beaten up and driving your car into a wall, etc.
It's associated with multiple cancers like colon, breast, and pancreatic.
Alcohol also damages the heart. High levels of alcohol essentially kill the heart. People get heart failure and die as a result of the heart just packing up. It has a particularly deleterious effect on the testes and reproduction. It can cause men to to develop breasts because it changes the hormonal balance from the liver. It impedes fertility in women, and worse than that, it is the leading cause of fetal damage in utero. Fetal alcohol syndrome causes more damaged children than autism and Fragile X and Down syndrome put together. And that's because it's a toxin to the developing embryo.
That's all the long-term damage. It can also kill quickly. About a third of all fatal car crashes in the US involve drunk drivers, and about 11,000 people die each year in drunk driving crashes, according to the US Department of Transportation. It's also strongly linked with domestic violence, assaults, and murder. So after knowing all the harm alcohol causes, why do any of us drink?
I think the reason alcohol has survived in human society for, as long as we know of human society, is because it is the social drink.
What alcohol does to civilization, that's in a moment.
1440 started in 2017 with a simple promise: to deliver fact-driven, impactful news to smart, curious readers. Today, our audience of over 4 million is made up of engaged news consumers who want more than just the headlines. They want to understand the why and the how. Yet, finding high-quality resources to go deeper, beyond this podcast, of course, has never been more difficult. The best work, from videos to long-form journalism, is too often buried beneath countless pages of clickbait and low-quality AI-generated content. That's why we created 1440 Topics. Our staff hand-curates only the best content and organizes it into a single place for you to explore. We've done the hard work so you can spend more time learning about alternative investments, hurricanes, ancient Rome, and so much more. Continue learning at join1440.com. 1440 Topics, separating what's worth your time from the rest of the internet.
Humans have been drinking booze for thousands of years. Some say it's what led to civilization itself. But if it's so harmful to our bodies, why didn't evolution knock it out? Anthropologist and Professor Edward Slingerland thinks he has the answer.
Cultures see alcohol as a source of inspiration.
Edward is a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia and the author of Drunk: How We Sipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way to Civilization. So with Edward as our next guide, let's start at the beginning. And the beginning is a very long time ago. 10 million years ago, the thinking goes, one of our primate ancestors starts eating some fruit.
Fruit that had fallen off of trees and was fermenting a bit and just naturally contained a bit of alcohol.
It's bubbly, fizzy, and gives this primate a buzz. That's because around this time, the primate develops a mutation that metabolizes ethanol. Why? Well, fruit has a lot of calories, and alcohol has a distinct smell you can detect from far away.
And so the idea was smelling ethanol and being attracted to it and being able to track down its source in the jungle was adaptive because it allowed us to find these high-calorie rewards, this fermenting fruit.
By the way, it's not just primates. Some birds and even fruit flies can metabolize alcohol. By the time humans come along in our evolutionary timeline, we already have the ability to process booze.
We have artistic representations of people drinking that are 20,000 years old.
For a long time, researchers believed humans invented agriculture for food, and then learned they could turn crops into beer. But in recent decades, some researchers say that story might be backwards.
Maybe people were motivated to start cultivating grains because they wanted to make beer. They wanted to make more and better beer, and not because they wanted bread.
Edward says there's a lot of data that supports this. It seems like the first crops humans planted were chosen because of their ability to affect your mind, not provide nutrition.
So if this is true, and there's a lot of converging evidence for it, there's a very literal sense in which intoxication led to civilization. our desire to get intoxicated actually motivated us to start civilization in the first place. And then later on, we were like, oh, you can eat this stuff too.
Over thousands of years and all over the world, there's evidence of humans drinking. Alcohol vessels show up in ancient Chinese tombs, often as some of the most important items buried with the dead. And the ancient Greeks held drinking parties called symposia, where they discussed philosophy and poetry. But they watered down their wine to beer-like strength.
The function of that is that it gives the symposiarch the ability to control everyone's alcohol consumption. Because if things are flagging, if people are getting bored, if it's not going well, maybe I'll put a little less water in and make it stronger this time around. If people are starting to get sloppy and there's a little too much drinking going on, I'll put some more water when I pass it around. So it gave them a way to basically titrate the strength of what they were drinking so they could keep everyone at kind of an optimal blood alcohol content to get all the social, creative bonding effects without going too far, but also without undershooting.
So the ancient Greeks used booze to keep the conversation flowing. Others realized that drinking made people more creative. That's because booze turns down your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that helps with boring adult tasks like doing your taxes. Children don't have well-developed PFCs, which is why they're bad at adult responsibilities, but good at doing things like mixing Barbies with Legos. But alcohol makes adults more like children in creatively productive ways.
This is why cultures see alcohol as a source of inspiration. The ancient Persians wouldn't make an important decision without getting drunk and talking about it first because they wanted to completely explore the possibility space before they made a decision. We want to think about if there's something we're not considering or some factor we haven't taken into account. The only way you get that kind of broad view, the kind of big flexibility of thought, is by turning down your cognitive control regions a bit.
The Persians would then sober up and make sure they didn't decide something stupid.
It's similar to this kind of idea of, write on alcohol, but edit on coffee. You also want to you want your sober mind to check the results of what your non-sober mind came up with.
In Edwards' view, all this points to one key idea. Humans don't drink because of some evolutionary accident that gave us a taste for poison. We drink because it has real societal benefits.
One of them is definitely anxiety reduction.
Being human is stressful. Once we developed agriculture, we started to live in dense villages, and that brought social tensions.
And alcohol was arguably a tool for kind of calming those tensions down.
Humans are also not always trustworthy. Booze helped with that too.
Everywhere around the world throughout history, anytime you have potentially hostile individuals sitting down to negotiate a war treaty or a marriage deal or some kind of trade deal, the alcohol comes out. And that's because it's reducing your ability to lie.
Lying is hard on the brain. You have to hold in your brain both the truth and the story you're telling. Alcohol disrupts your cognitive control, so it's harder to keep it all straight.
When you're drinking alcohol, you're less inclined to lie. It's boosting endorphins, serotonin. It's making you feel good. It's actually making you more honest and more trustworthy.
Its ability to act as a kind of truth serum, plus its way of making us less inhibited, more social, is a big reason why so many world-changing meetings are held over drinks.
When Nixon went to China, he supposedly said, if we drink enough Mao Tai, this distilled Chinese beverage, if we drink enough of this, there's nothing we can't do.
So for most of human history, alcohol was used for gatherings, negotiations, reducing anxiety, and boosting creativity. But for most of that history, alcohol was also relatively weak. When you make beer or wine the traditional way, there's a limit to how strong it can get. That's because alcohol is generally produced as a result of a war between bacteria and yeast. They're both trying to consume the same resource in the grains. The yeast produces ethanol to kill off the bacteria. But at some point, the yeast reached their limit and shut down. So if you're making wine, pretty much the strongest you can get is about 16% alcohol by volume. Most beers back in the day were probably just 2 to 3%.
If you're drinking a 2 to 3% ABV beer, especially if you're doing physical labor or you're eating food, you can drink that all day long.
So it was hard for our ancestors to get blackout drunk. That changed in the 1600s. This is when distilled spirits became common in Europe. Humans figured out how to separate the alcohol from water through evaporation and condensation, and do it all at scale. Now there was no limit to how strong a drink could be. Gins and tequilas could hit 90% ABV.
Even though it's still just ethanol, I think it should be considered a different drug. Most of the benefits that I talk about in the book come at a kind of mild inebriation level.
Widespread distilled spirits has another big effect on world history. They're so strong, it's almost impossible for them to go bad. So as European countries became colonial powers, they realized they could trade this stuff for goods. Or slaves.
It turned alcohol into a commodity in a way that it never was before.
It also turned alcohol into a much bigger problem. Think about it. Until recent centuries, drinking generally happened during social gatherings, complete with rituals that serve to slow you down. If you're someone who might be at risk of becoming dependent on alcohol, there were a lot of obstacles. First, the drinks were relatively weak, and then rituals stopped you from having too much too fast. In traditional Chinese banquets, you can't take a sip until someone makes a toast.
And you have to wait now until another toast is made.
By the way, a similar thing happens today when you go to a bar with friends. We generally order beers in rounds. That stops one person from ordering too much too quickly. But all this is broken by the widespread availability of distilled spirits, like vodka. Those can get you drunk in minutes. In the 18th century, London was flooded with cheap gin.
It was called the gin craze. It broke down families, it created orphans, it killed people.
It then spread to North America. Men would head to saloons after work to drink, then come home and abuse their wives and kids. This is what sparked the temperance movements in the 19th and 20th centuries.
The early prohibition activists, they wanted to close down saloons. They wanted to close down these gin-consuming places. And I don't think really wine or beer was on their radar.
This culminated in prohibition in the US in the 1920s and early 30s. Drinking was banned nationwide, but Edward thinks there's a reason it didn't last.
I think with the prohibition movement, people realize when we get rid of alcohol, we've gotten rid of something that was actually useful.
We want a drug that calms our social anxiety, acts as a truth serum, and makes us more creative.
No one yet has invented a drug that can do everything that alcohol can do, but doesn't have any of the downsides.
Prohibition ended in 1933, but it had some lasting unintended consequences. For one, it helped normalize drinking at home, drinking alone. Add to that the rise of the suburbs after World War II. Workers began commuting long distances by car.
And then if you want to drink, you're drinking alone at home, or drinking, at most with your family, and not having those kind of broader social interactions that we used to have when human life was more focused around pubs and coffee shops and trattoria and things like that.
All of this, distilled spirits, drinking alone, magnifies the negative effects of alcohol and divorces it from many of the positives. Humans have known alcohol can create dependence for centuries, but it didn't really become a widespread problem until the advent of gin and other distilled spirits, and when humans started consuming booze at home. Today, it's estimated that about 7% of the world's population lives with alcohol use disorder. It develops for a few reasons. Some try to dull pain and depression. Some get addicted to the endorphin and dopamine hits. And a third group becomes dependent on it to treat social anxiety. All of this brings us back to alcohol and our health. It's no secret drinking can wreak havoc on our bodies. We talked earlier about all the harm it causes. But wait a moment, isn't alcohol supposed to have some health benefits too?
So why is it that the French, who eat as much or more fat than we do, suffer fewer heart attacks, even though they smoke more and exercise less?
This is the late Morley Safer back in 1991, introducing one of his most famous stories on CBS's 60 Minutes. He was reporting on the so-called French paradox. For all the butter and cigarettes they consumed, why were the French having far fewer heart attacks?
The answer to the riddle, the explanation of the paradox, may lie in this inviting glass.
Red wine, specifically. As soon as the story aired, wine sales in the US soared 40%. And for more than 2 decades, moderate drinking of wine became seen as healthy. If that seems too good to be true, well, Dr. David Nutt says,
More recent research has shown that the French paradox comes from living in the south of France, where there's lots of sunshine, high levels of vitamin D. You have a diet rich in polyunsaturated fats. You have a very healthy diet, and you probably have a more relaxed lifestyle as well.
Over the past decade, research has stripped any luster of health from wine and other alcoholic drinks.
Some of you may be surprised to hear me say that there is no proven physical health benefits from alcohol.
In fact, the pendulum has swung the other way. The World Health Organization now says there is no safe amount of alcohol. Health authorities around the world are revising their recommendations. Canada, for instance, now recommends no more than 2 drinks per week. David Nutt says if alcohol were discovered today, based on what we know now, regulators would be unlikely to allow more than 1 glass of wine per year. These new warnings are breaking through. Generation Z, today's teens and 20-somethings, are drinking a lot less than older generations, like 20% less than millennials. That's for a lot of reasons, but health is a big one. Despite all the risks, both of our experts continue to drink, in moderation. About 10 years ago, David Nutt and his daughter opened a wine bar in West London. The same man who called alcohol the most harmful drug in the UK also owns a wine bar.
People often ask me, do you still drink knowing all this? And I say yes. And the reason I drink is because I enjoy drinking. I enjoy the social experience of drinking alcohol. But I have changed my drinking a lot over the last decade, partly due to the understanding that the safe limits of alcohol are lower than we thought before, and partly because we have an alternative.
David has been developing an alcohol substitute called Sentia that has some of the brain-boosting effects of alcohol, like the relaxed, sociable buzz, but without all the negatives. And for Edward Slingerland, the anthropologist, despite all the downsides, alcohol has been a net positive for society. And a big part of that is how it enhances us socially.
Ethanol is dangerous for your physical health. So is loneliness. Loneliness is incredibly dangerous, and it's something kind of understudied. So if you stay home and you don't go to the pub, maybe you're sparing your liver and you're sparing yourself that ethanol exposure. What are you losing when you don't have those social connections? If you told me you can never again have a cool climate Chardonnay from the Santa Cruz Mountains, you'll never taste that taste again, but you'll live an extra month, I'd rather take the Chardonnay.
Just maybe drink it in moderation. So what have we learned? Alcohol is a paradox. For centuries, humans have grappled with alcohol's dual nature, a force for social bonding and a cause of deep harm. It's something we turn to for comfort, connection, and creativity. But it's also something that can silently erode our health, our relationships, and our sense of control. even today, as we understand more about its effects on our bodies and minds, alcohol still holds a powerful place in society. Whether or not we choose to drink is a personal decision, but for those who do, maybe the real challenge lies in how, when, and why. So maybe next time you pick up a glass, remember, it's not just about the buzz, it's about the people you're with, the moments you share, and having the wisdom to know when to put it down. Thanks for listening to 1440 Explores. I'm Soni Kassem. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And let us know what you think at podcast@join1440.com. While you're at it, start your learning journey with us at join1440.com. Subscribe to our free daily and weekly newsletters on world affairs, business and finance, society and culture, and much more. 1440 Explores is a production of Rhyme Media for 1440 Media. This episode was produced by Dan Bobkoff and Kim Naderfien-Petersa. It was fact-checked by Sanam Skelly. Our sound designer is Jake Howitt. The executive producer at Rhyme is Dan Bobkoff, and the executive producers at 1440 are me and Drew Steigerwald. See you next time.